Thanks for tuning into the Just Go Play podcast, where we look to develop and promote a positive youth sports experience. As always, we are available for speaking and private engagements and can be reached at info@justgoplay.ca. You can also catch full video versions of our podcast on our YouTube channel. And don't forget to visit us at justgoplay.ca. Enjoy the episode. Hey everyone, welcome to the Just Go Play show. I'm here with Matt Young and Elisa. And Matt, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing great, thanks, Daryl. How are you?
I'm great, man. Elisa, how you doing?
Not bad, managing, trying to stay active in all this.
Keeping it real in COVID.
Not bad.
That's what I'm doing. I'm surviving and I'm thriving. I'm starting to thrive. I'm starting to get used to this COVID life. Matt, what are we talking about today?
Well, I think we should lead in with the number one question. Last week, we talked about sports systems and 3 things they really needed to master regardless of what's happening, whether it's after a pandemic or not. We talked about, number 1, getting the right people into the right roles right away. We talked about doing your homework, or environmental scan, as Elisa calls it, or market research. And then we talked about using those to really create the culture and vision. And the number 1 question we had from all across the country actually was, this all is great, but how do we increase the amount of strive for a greater amount of accountability in sports relating to the administration level? So the question came is, yeah, this is great. I came in, I'm all fired up. I want to make this change, but I got X, Y, or Z in the way, pushing me down or suppressing me or hold on, and they seem to be part of the problem. How do we circumnavigate those people or onboard those people? So I think we should open that up, because I know, Daryl, you've got experience, and then I know Elisa's got experience. So between the 3 of us, perhaps we can outline some of those experiences to define what it is that we're talking about, and then move into some solutions and points that we all know and have used and discussed that work. So how about that? Daryl, why don't you tell us about your experience?
Wow. You know what? This reminds me of my teaching experience. I went into teaching. I was that guy that went in. I thought I could, change everything. I could change the game. I'm going to change the way kids, do phys ed. I'm going to make everyone healthy and active. I'm going to be like Coach Carter. I'm going to make everyone love me. I'm going to be tough, but everyone's going to love me. And I went into a system, and, no knock. I got a lot of respect for teachers. I'm no longer a teacher, just for the record. But what I found when I was there was I was doing a lot of the coaching, and no one else is doing any coaching. I 7 years in, I'm like, why doesn't anyone coach anymore? Daryl, I used to do that. I don't do that anymore. You're young. That's for the young people to do. And I was like, there was no accountability from the top. I was accountable to the kids, but no other teachers wanted to. I was asking for help and whatnot. And when a kid comes up to you and says, Coach, we need a coach for cross country. We don't have anyone to coach cross country. I couldn't say no. So, I was accountable to the kids, and there was no one at the top that was helping teachers be accountable to coaching and building a great experience for these people. So for me, looking back, and I see it happens in different organizations, different levels. But that's where there was a lack of accountability, and I got burnt out. I ain't gonna lie. 7 years in, I was doing all the coaching and whatnot, and I didn't feel like I had support. And I started sort of resenting, and like everyone else, I started mailing it in. I started doing less.
Yeah, and you make a good point. Like, I want to really hit on that. Not feeling like you have support. That was the number 1 complaint from everybody. And question from everyone. We don't feel like we have support. How do we get that support? So, Daryl, you're outlining a sector that we're all familiar with, and that's the education sector. And you're outlining something that's not uncommon. I'm coming in to make a difference. I get beat down, and then I start to mail it in. I start to just do the bare minimum, collect the paycheck, get the pension, move on. But and the short-term result of that is, yeah, you're happy. And hey, listen, we don't need to get into this podcast whether teachers are overvalued and undervalued, because I would agree that they're undervalued. But listen, nobody held a gun to anyone's head that said you got to be a teacher. That stuff when you're coming into it. So, what's the long-term result of that? So what we're seeing, what I think, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, what I see is a system that gets tired, and we're just using education as the example, could be anyone in any position. What's the result of that? We get private school. And then so more parents go, okay, well, I'm going to send my kids to private school then, because everyone's just mailing in public school. And then we got these strikes, and we feel undervalued. And it's like this vicious cycle that just keeps going around and around and around. So how do we stop that? Or Elisa, what do you think of that? Or what's the counterpoint to that?
Yeah, I got on Daryl's experience, because I'm not a teacher. I haven't been a teacher. I've worked in schools and a lot of the after school stuff, or gone in and taught stuff in maybe the PE classes and some of the classrooms. So I've been in the environment. Obviously, I've spoken to parents, I've spoken to teachers. And one of the things I noticed, and it's not just only in the education sector, it's in the sports sector, it's in the health sector, it's everywhere, is that complacency. So I have a very similar story to Daryl. In my experience, same idea. In university, you have all these great ideas of what I'm going to do when I get out into the field. And you're living on this level of hopes and dreams, and everyone around you is thinking, yeah, let's do this, and let's innovate that, and let's try this new, and let's change the world. As kumbaya as all that sounds, you get into the field and you're given an opportunity, and you're told, okay, here are your responsibilities, and you bring in all these ideas, and they just get shot down and shot down and shot down and shot down. And eventually you're told, this is the box you need to work within. So if you can't figure it out in this box, you can't do it. And so when you're looking at all the problems, and so I was working in the sports sector in kind of a newer area at the time, it was around physical literacy. And so we're looking at how do we work to increase participation in whatever activity across the board in multiple sectors. And the organizations I was working with, our hands were tied in a lot of ways, whether it was funding reasons or you mentioned the team part. We just didn't have enough support. So it was, if you want to do this, you have to figure out how to do it on your own with no resources or support. And then you also had the bureaucracy coming down saying, you can't say that, you can't do this. And we all know in order to change something or innovate something, you need to adjust things that have been the status quo. So because it's how it's always been, you have to turn that on its head. You have to poke holes in it. You have to push it off the ledge sometimes. And when your bureaucracy is telling you can't do that because you represent X, Y, Z, and they won't like that, and that doesn't look good for whoever, you're going, well, what can I do? And then eventually you get the conversation with somebody who's at the top level saying, you can't do that. So you're going, well, my options are to do nothing and to work within this box where you set the bar so freaking low that nothing is going to change. And you're telling me to just toe the line. And for all of the three of us on this podcast, one of the reasons we're doing this is because we don't do that. We see the problem, we see an opportunity for a solution, and we see all the bullshit in the way, and we don't want to get knocked down with that. And my last point on that is I had somebody tell me, because I was, I'm pushing back against all these kind of constraints and restrictions against what we were trying to do. And someone said, if you take a good person and put them in a toxic environment, there's no way they're going to change that environment. First of all, that environment is going to change them, and it's going to decay them. So we have to look at, it's one thing to be the individual, to go into an environment and say, I'm going to help change this for the better. You have to look at the environment they're going into as well. And a lot of us, to Daryl's point, either just mail it in afterwards, or we jump ship and we say, it's not going to happen here. You got to cut ties and move on and find somewhere else, or do it yourself in your own way. So,
man, and that's such a good point, because Daryl raised a good point about education, and we see the byproduct of education, unhappy workforce generally, a shift to private school in some areas, and then that just it perpetuates the cycle. And you've identified the sports sector, which is also the same, because you get out of the public sports system, and then that gives rise to the academies or the players. And one of the things that I want to highlight that you said for all of our listeners is that box, because you couldn't have been more accurate. You got to check that box and work with inside that box. Could you imagine telling that to a student? Could you imagine telling that to an athlete? We would never do that as a teacher, an educator, and a coach. We're always advocating think outside the box thinking, think outside the box playing, be creative, do this. It's a fluid world. It's a fluid environment, sport, life, but yet we are unwilling to keep that same mentality when we get into the administration, the organization. And Elisa, I know you talked about being beholden to the funding, the granting, somebody above, and that's what the comment, and that's what the questions are from the people and the listeners that are coming into us. is, okay, we know that that's a system. We agree with everything that you two have just said. So how do we get into, how do we deal with people and helping them be more accountable? So Daryl, how did you, before you left, I guess leaving was your ultimate answer, which is sad because that's how we lose great educators, we lose great coaches way too often because of this. So let's get into some solutions, because that's what our listeners want. They want solutions, like what kind of things. And I know we don't have the magic ball, and you can't stop crazy, and all of us wouldn't be on this podcast if we had the solution. We'd be talking from some island somewhere in the sun. So let's get into some of the solutions. So Daryl, what do you think? Start us off. How do we increase the level of accountability to being outside the box, to being innovative, to innovation, to all that thing at the higher levels of sport, because we're talking about sport?
Well, I'm going to go back to something you said earlier about the private school and whatnot. And one of the reasons I left teaching was because of our pay for play system, right? So for me, I figured if I want to work with motivated people, they got to pay me. So that's why I went into the coaching world. And I know that I wanted to be accountable to people, and I wanted people to be accountable to me. And that's what's happening, I guess, in the private school. As you talked about private school system, people are saying, if I pay, these guys are going to have to be accountable to me, and I'm going to have to be accountable to them. So that's why I think that pay for pay system is growing. We're almost setting it up. We're average, mediocre on this side, and all of a sudden people are like, well, dude, you get what you pay for. I refer to it as the BBD, the bigger, better deal, right? People want the bigger, better deal. And if they're not getting it, they're like, well, you're just going to be, you stay in that box that Elisa was talking about. And that box is basically learning how to be helpless almost. Learn how to do the bare ass minimum. And that's the real problem. We're teaching people to learn do the bare minimum and get by. So that's, I don't know, Elise, you want to add anything to that or not? Because that's how I see the lack of accountability or where I left. And the reason I left the public system and went to the private system, and we've joked and called these guys sportspreneurs, but that's where I found accountability.
Yeah. And you're right. And you know what? We're quote unquote in the know. If you get a parent who says, I don't know this from the other, whoever's going to sell me better, I'm probably going to be more persuaded towards. I mean, the school system is one thing. If you have the money or not, that's a very clear line. If you don't have the money, your kid's going to private school or to public school. That's just it. If you have the money to make that choice, now do I send my child to a charter school or to a private school or to an alternative school outside of the public school system? Then which one do I do, and why do I do it? If I'm paying those dollars, I feel like I have some say in the result or in the action or in what's happening. And I have the opportunity to say, I want that person gone. I want this person gone. Obviously as a collective of teachers or as parents. And I don't think you have that same power in the public system, and you don't have in the public system itself, especially, and we can talk about the union environment versus the private environment. Those layers are adding to the complexity of the situation. So I've spoken to some teachers in the union environment, and I'm not here talking pro or con union, but they're saying, Lisa, I'm not allowed to do these things. They are not allowed to step outside of certain roles and certain boxes. So when they say that to me, I don't have an answer. And I don't know if you guys do. When they say, I have to do these things, and I am not allowed within my union to go outside of that. Whereas the sport entrepreneurs, they can do whatever they want. They can say whatever they want. They can charge whatever they want. They can pivot however they want. They have that flexibility, which is attractive, I think, when you see the rigidity in somewhere else.
Yeah, and that pisses me off in sport, because in the public sector, we also have the ability to do that. But we get the people, there's two kinds of people that get into sport. There's builders and maintainers. And describing the builders is someone who, like Daryl described, wants to come in, make a difference, has some expertise, has the emotion, wants to make a difference. The maintainers are the people that, whoa, we can't move too fast. We tried these things. You think you're the expert, blah, blah, blah. I've been here for 10 years. et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You need a blend of both. And I'm not saying you just need all builders, and I'm not saying you just need all maintainers. You need a good blend of both. But right now, I would, hands down, from our experience, suggest there are way more maintainers in sport than there are builders. And I'll give you a couple examples, and we all have examples. So let's talk about them. A guy called me. He was on the board of directors for a Canadian Olympic sport. They were who were competing in Brazil. And he was telling me a story. He's on the bus, he's drinking champagne, they're having steak tartare, they're on their way to the venue. Everyone's in the lanyards, it's full of delegates. And he gets a call from one of the athletes that says, I don't know where to get food. I can't get food. I'm starving. And he said, right there, I understood that the system was broken. I look back, and on the bus, we're having champagne and steak, and there are athletes that are competing, don't even have the means to go outside and get food because it's not safe, or they don't feel safe, or there wasn't anything. And this is not me making it up. This is a guy having this conversation saying, hey, listen, you're right. How did we get to this system? And when you look at the higher end pro sports, it's easy. Let's generalize. People want to hang around athletes. They want to rub shoulders with cool people. They want to wear the lanyards. They want to march in. There was a stat of a country who had 3 times the amount of coaches and administrators than they did the actual athletes attend an Olympic. Why is that happening? Because we've got away from what this is all about, and we've got away from who it's for, who this is supposed to serve. And the three of us talk about that all the time. So,
I went away from the question. I don't want to cut you off, but I feel I went away from this question. I just went away to just go back to that afterwards, though.
Yeah. So no, go ahead.
Well, you asked me, how do we deal with people who are not accountable? And I went off on my tangent about private school, and sorry, man. Listen,
Jerry.
Yeah, stay with me, Daryl. We have to teach management. If you're not accountable, like sometimes they don't know. They didn't know any better. Right? Like if the guy at the top is not accountable and showing them how to be accountable and is not accountable himself, it's hard for these people to follow him. Like I know with my athletes, with my clients and whatnot, if I show up and I'm eating crap, I'm not working out or whatnot, how can they be accountable to me? They need to see that I'm accountable, right? So it starts with the leader.
Yeah, and we talked about right people's right roles right away, Daryl. So that's a great point, because the Harvard Business Review put out an article a little while ago that said we don't teach our middle managers how to manage properly. We keep escalating and elevating people into positions based on tenure, but we're not actually doing it based on metrics, and we're not actually doing it based on acumen, especially because it's a volunteer, it's in the thing, and everyone's going to come back and say, well, it's all volunteer. Okay, we need to take that volunteer thing and park it aside, because again, we always say it, just because you're a volunteer doesn't give you license to suck at what you do. So I agree, we need to teach management skills. And just because you played a sport doesn't qualify for you for coaching or managing a sport. They're two completely different things. So we got to realize that a lot of times when people would say, well, I played at a high level at Div 1 school, well, turning around and managing and leading other people, that's a completely different skill set. And we can't just let that get away. We got to talk about what is great leadership. Great leadership is leaving an organization in better standing than you found it. Those are kind of the easy ways, because the question we're being asked is, how do we strive for greater accountability? Well, if we're going to say leaving an organization better than you found it, well, then we got to get into the metrics. And that's where people shy away. Attract, retain, and grow. That is the responsibility. Would you two guys agree or disagree, or are there anything else? Attract, retain, and grow. If you've done the culture properly, if you put everything into place, and I'm just talking about accountability and how we can actually start to enforce that or look at it, it should be in those metrics. How many new participants are we attracting? What's our retain? How's our mechanism of retaining athletes and people and players and participants? And have we grown the business?
Wait, man, I didn't hear anything about winning. What happened to winning?
Because if you do that, you are winning.
Come on. You know, part of an organization, they're going to have to talk about winning somewhere in that.
Yeah, you know what? And I don't disagree. It's not important. However, they do that first, which has created this whole problem Whereas if you focus on the people first, the winning would take care of itself.
That's where I'm going though, Matt. That's the problem. It's backwards. They're focused on the winning and the dough first, making sure we got paid, we got enough money, and winning. And then all that stuff came afterwards. That's like the nice to have.
Right.
It's in the wrong order. Elise, what do you think about that?
Well, the winning is interesting because it's obviously we're all, we're in sport, we're in wherever it is. We want to win at what we're doing. We want to be the best. We want to be on top. We want to be better than we were. So we all want to win. But winning is, people talk about winning as a byproduct. It's a byproduct of good practice and good strategy and good this. You're going to win. You have an opportunity to do other things other than winning. So if you look at the value system of what you're trying to achieve, and this is what really got me sometimes in some of the sport groups I worked with, is what are we actually trying to do? And yeah, if the conversation is just, we want to win, then we're really not trying to do anything. We're really not. We're in youth sport, your job is not to win. Your job is to develop capable people who are going to go out into the world and be the best version of themselves. That's your job. And you're letting them play a sport, doing that and learning those skills. Your job is not just to have a bunch of W's and then that's it. And if we're holding our coaches accountable only to that, then that's the environment we're setting up for them to be in.
That's the problem.
100%.
Just holding them to the wins.
So winning is important, 100%. And anyone tells you otherwise is in la la land. Winning is important, but it is not important above everything else. You have to have that in line with other things you're trying to do in your organization. And it goes back to what you both keep saying is when you're prioritizing, what are we trying to do? You talk about the first game meeting, you talk to the parents, when you're talking to the coaches, and you're looking at what are we trying to achieve throughout the system, throughout the season. Winning is a part of that, but it is, what percentage of the pie and what else makes up that pie is a really important conversation that we don't ever think about. And one of the reasons is because winning is sexy. That's it. Everybody wants to be sitting on the bus, drinking champagne, being the ones touted around, fanfare. We highlight teams that are winning. We break apart teams that aren't. So we need to reflect and look back, and goes back to the value system around that. And how are we hiring people to be winners? And winners is not just on a scoreboard.
Yeah, that's a great point. I want to go back to the question. So like Daryl said, because we're spicy today and I love it. But I want to go back to the question on how do we deal with people who have become or are becoming that barrier, that block, that suppression. How do we do that? So we've got, those people, we need to teach them management. That's really coming from a top-down perspective, because it's not like as a parent or a coach, you can go into your executive director and go, I'm going to teach you how to manage this properly. They'll just say, yeah, see you later, pal. And by the way, that's a really good point, because the quote is, the more something threatens your existence, the more you avoid it. So what happens is, and we all know this, you become the parent and you can be skilled in business, physical literacy, coaching. You could be accredited out the wazoo. The minute you go in and you question somebody about what they're doing at a local community sport organization is the minute the walls go up and you get the big black X beside your name. This is a troublemaker. Elise is a troublemaker. What's Daryl trying to do here? So we have to understand that the more something threatens your existence, the more that it's going to be avoided. That's what we're dealing with. And that's what makes this so hard and frustrating for all the people that called in and said, I am a Canadian Olympian in my sport who wants to dedicate the rest of my life, my second act, to coaching, and I can't get the people in the NSO out of their own way. And that's what it's all about, getting people out of their own way. So that's what the question we've been asked. So I think, the tools like teaching management, understanding what great leadership is, those are just kind of, subjective things that we can do. Holding a mirror in front of their faces, making sure, like, are you being that guy? Why are you being that guy right now? Are you like asking these questions at the beginning of the year? What kind of organization is this? Doing your homework, making sure people, and again, we talked about this last segment. That's why the right people have to be in the right positions. You get the wrong person in that position of power, they're never going to give it up, and they're never going to let anybody else come in and steal the thunder, because they are the guru of X, Y, and Z. So when people ask me that, I always say, and I don't know what you guys think about this, typically a volunteer run has 5 years in every sport, because your kid's going to play 5 years minimum. I think it should be capped at 3 years. So I think a good solution would be, I have to walk through this story. Bear with me. Local hockey association, it's ours. Our son is fortunately to be one of the better quote unquote players. So I have no issue, but I'm watching what's happening and I got a big issue with the kids that quote unquote aren't as good. So I bring it up with the coach. Okay. And my point of bringing up the coach is, hey, listen, what kind of education did you guys get around building confidence, character, and connection? And are we baselining these kids? What's an athlete development? Do you mind if I ask you these questions? No. This would be great. We don't get any coach education, blah, blah, blah. Okay, perfect. Who do I go talk to? Technical director. Go talk to the technical director. Yeah, this is a good point. If you want to make change, go to the AGM. So I trot into the AGM. What do we got in terms of coach education? Guy sitting at the front of the panel. Well, his answer was the same answer that he gave every single other question that was asked. Well, if you think you can do better, join the board and be better. And I stood up and said, but why is this the answer to every question? Why do you call us into an AGM and then get defensive? Some of us just might have questions. Well, we don't like the tone you're using. Okay, well, no one likes the tone of a question. That's going to out them. Next, so I joined the board. I'm in there for the first board meeting. I get a piece of paper. We're hiring our president today. We're electing our president today. And today's president is Bob and Janine. Write down who you want. And I put my hand up. Well, how are we electing these people? Did I miss a meeting? What do you mean? Did you miss a meeting? Well, what's the vision, mission? What was the feedback from last year? What do we need to work on? What do we need to do? And it was to the effect of, oh God, Matt, why are you asking all these questions? No, you didn't miss a meeting. We're just going to elect. One of the elects goes, that's a good point. Next week we'll come back and we'll present our vision for the following year, which is a great start, right? So they come back, they present their visions, we elect a president, and then we're off to the races. Let's go, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. I go, hang on a second. What is the greatest opportunity? What are our top 3 things that we can do to improve over last year? And what was the parent feedback? And I quote, in a board meeting, one of the directors stood up and said, Matt, listen, every single one of these parents in this association are a bunch of fucking morons. He said that in there. I'm using his language.
I got you.
He said that in a meeting. And I stood up and said, really? Is that what you believe? You believe we live in the second wealthiest demographic in our province, and no parent here has any skills that could contribute to the betterment of this association? Nope. I go, can you remind me how did you join the board? Well, my kid played. Oh, so you're a parent. No, but I'm no problem. This is not the right place for me. So that is one person's example, real time, no nonsense. So I get it when these people call us and they go, how do we get rid of those people? That guy is still the president of the Hockey Association 15 years later. And all of the metrics have gone downhill. So the participation, this used to be the second largest catchment of hockey. It's not anymore, and people are tuning out and they're giving a whole bunch of excuses. Oh, this is why. You guys need to pump this association up on social media. People just quit and went for academies and they just left. So that is one example that I know is being played out in soccer clubs and hockey clubs and basketball clubs and baseball clubs and all sport clubs all across the country. The question is, you two, how do you
get rid of that guy?
Well, my suggestion would have been, if you had a 3-year review on attract, retain, and growth metrics, not by him, not by them, there has to be audited financial statements for every organization, nonprofit or not. That tells you how many registrations there were. So there's no way we don't know that information. And that information should be part of what goes into a review. And that review should be done. First of all, any president should be hired by the association, the entire association. They're your clients, based on him or her standing up and sharing a vision. However that's done. That they should be elected by the membership, not by the board of directors, not by their buddy who's like, okay, I'm on my way out now, Daryl, yeah, come on over here. I got something for you. Yeah, you just slide in here. That should be done. 3 years, hang on a second, 3-year review. If they have maintained or grown, they get to go to a 5-year maximum. 5-year maximum before they have to leave and prepare that. And on year 4, they're onboarding the next person that has a 5-year cap. So you can't, what that would prevent is people getting into these organizations and never, ever getting out. What do you think?
Said a really interesting word there around should. It shouldn't be this way, or it shouldn't be that way. I agree with you. It shouldn't be, but it is. When they say these guys are coming in here, they're volunteers, and they're saying we don't have the money to hire anybody else, we don't have this isn't how it should be, but it is. So when someone's coming back to you and saying you're absolutely right, but there's nothing we can do, what do you say to that? Because we live in this world of should but don't, and we're so just complacent with this is the reality that we're in. We have these volunteers, or this guy's never going to leave. And one of the things in sport, as we all know, is it's an old boys club or an old girls club, however you want to term that. We know each other through relationships and friendships, and my kid grew up with your kid, or we grew up playing the same sport together. So we're going to keep those people and do what's best to keep them where they want to be. Not necessarily because they deserve to be there, but because of the relationships that we have. And this is high level sport all the way down across sport, other disciplines. So it's not just sport. So we can all sit around here and talk about the context of the environment we want to see. And then we need to drop that into the real world of the culture of sport, or the culture of the environments that we're actually seeing, and address that as well. And so when someone tells me this guy is never going to leave that position for these reasons, no matter what you do, now what do you do? And I don't know if you have an answer for that, because that's, like, these are some of the conversations that I've had with people. Say, we've tried to fire this person, we've tried to get them to leave, we've tried to let them go, and they just dig their heels in harder and harder because they like being that president of their hockey club on the North Shore or wherever it is.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge, Matt, is that guy's not accountable to anybody. You said it. He's not accountable to anybody. So why would he leave?
And this gets back into our conversation about the franchisor.
Why would he leave? If he owns it, if he's one of the owners or whatnot, why would he leave? Like, he's comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got to answer to no one. You know, that's the problem. And that's part of the problem with sport. There's no CEO that governs all of Canada and says, hey, you have to run your organization this way every 5 years. The plan you just laid out, which sounds real cool in theory, but, you know, it's not happening. So how do we get rid of this guy? Or maybe a bunch of parents have to write letters and say, we need change. I don't know. But that's the frustrating part about this. And that's what these parents, execs or whatever that are not at the top they're frustrated with, is can't get rid of that guy that you're talking about.
And like this comes back to you look at change in any environment. Anyone who's ever wanted to have change and they're going up against some kind of behemoth, or they're going up the way it always was, how do they inspire change? How do they actually execute change? And a lot of these change initiatives fail because they just can't break through, and they can't get past what's laid in place, these big walls they have to overcome, or these big deep pockets they have to overcome. But I think, you know, if we pull it back to what are we trying to achieve, and the rationality around that. So we need to have, to Matt's point, and to Daryl, your point, we need to have strong accountability. And that maybe needs to come from the parents. So the parents need to be informed in the sense of, this is what we're asking for as a whole, as a collective. So when you go to an AGM, and I've been to plenty of them, and there's 6 people over here, or there's 20 of the same people who always show up, how do you engage your membership? And I know sometimes the leadership doesn't want that membership there because they don't want them to ask for change. They don't want them to tell them what they're doing. So to your point, Matt, when you're asking someone to do something that threatens your existence, you're going to try your best to keep them away from it. We need to stop that. And as parents, all of us are, as parents in this organization, we need to step up and understand this is our responsibility to hold accountable these guys, because nobody else is. We think someone else, you know, someone up above them is going to hold them accountable. We need to do it. And we need to hold ourselves accountable, and having something on paper, having those things set up, Matt, like you said, like a 3-year or a 5-year cap and a plan for that succession. These are the things that need to be in place. So looking back at our governance and making sure that they're there. And if they're not, how do we change that? How do we address that?
Right. And we're all about solutions. So the challenge that we have is we've been asked, okay, what do I do here? And we were very upfront at the beginning when we said we didn't have the answer
Well, the answer,
for
yeah.
this, but there are steps. And Elisa, you've articulated one of them really well, and that's have a voice. And Daryl, same with you. We have to address it with people that can make a change. So many times we hear parents complaining in the background, or they complain to people that can't make the change. And there's lots of great examples and recent examples, Me Too movement. Even the sport of hockey started to have their own movement. Let's not call it a Me Too movement, but the athletes spoke up. We're tired of the old school coaching. We're tired of the old school ways. Change comes with critical mass. We all know that. It doesn't happen all the time. There's been an example with the Whitecaps here and abuse with the girls team, and they tried to. It seemed like they tried to just make it go away, like everything does. Oh, there's a whole bunch of people that are upset. Let's just wait it out. We'll send some PR, send a note, and it'll go away eventually. It didn't go away because there was committed people that were there to make sure that it kept getting called out, and it all started with one person articulating it, and she articulated it really well, and it grew and it scaled from there. And that spawned a whole bunch of other people in other sports talking about their experience as well. So my counterpoint to it's hard to make changes, we're actually in a moment in time where we're seeing that happen, and that comes with critical mass. Like you said, Daryl, it is parents getting together and asking questions, and you got to ask the right people the right questions, because you know what, I don't care how egocentric a director or president of an organization is, if they're getting consistent questions and messages from all of their people every single day, and it's coming, that's how you get you weed out the bad apples. So that's one thing that is in our control, because Elisa makes a good point. You got to control your controllables. That's one thing that you can do. Demanding to see, attract, retain, and growth metrics. As a paid person, that you are, and Elisa, to your point, as a parent, there are lots of things you're entitled to receive. Audited financial statements are one of those things. So knowing that, that's another little tip. And are we saying just by raising your voice and the right people and getting audited financial statements, that's going to do it? Of course not. It's a relentless, it's relentless. And media, unfortunately, what makes change for people like this? Shame. And we got to always shame them. We can't just pick up the phone and go, we're here to help. Can you do something? Blah, blah, blah. We went through all your processes. We did all that stuff. Then we got to resort to shaming.
But nobody wants to be that person who rocks the boat, man. That's the problem we have, is people they suffer in silence, right? It's not easy. Like, I get it. Like, you're right. People have to speak up, and they have to find like-minded people that are against what's going on. But just from being in different organizations, among different groups, peer groups, nobody wants to be the squeaky wheel, or the parent
cut, to get blackballed,
or the parent cut, or the whatever. It's like, damn. And then, often, and I'll use a hockey example. It's like, this is AAA. Welcome to AAA. It's almost accepted that this is how we roll. And if you want to stay here, you got to roll this way, or you got to go somewhere else. That's one of the problems, man. And
but Daryl, hold on. That comment, like, this is how we roll, you have to accept it or not.
No. I don't get me wrong. I don't agree with that, but I'm just saying that's what they'll hear.
What I'm saying is, I agree with that if what they're saying is what we're trying to achieve. If what they're saying, like, if they're standing up and they're saying, this is what we value, this is what our vision is, this is who we are as an organization. And if in that it's written out, the accountability, we're doing, the pieces that are more than winning. If what we're talking about, say both of us, we all work together, we build this ultimate sport team, and we have everything in it, what we're talking about, the leadership, the management metrics, the attract, retain, grow, the qualities that we're looking for in development of the culture around winning, or, beyond winning. Say we have all those things in place, right? If this is the one. And then people are coming to us and they're saying, we want to be a part of this, We say, no problem. This is how we are. This is who we are. This is what we do. This is how we are. If you don't like this, piss off. If you want to be that person who wants to just win at all costs, this isn't the team for you. That's what I'm saying. Like, that message is okay if what you're saying gets you where you need to be. And so I think what you're referring to, obviously, and I've heard it, is the AAA example of, this is who we are. And we were kind of like up on this pedestal of, you're so lucky to be here, so don't make any waves. That's what you're saying, 100%. But if we flip that around and still hold true to not wavering on our commitments to what we're trying to do, and say, this is who we are. These are what we value. This is our vision. This is our governance. And we're standing firm in that, and not letting someone come in and twist it around and say, you know what? I don't really want to develop character in our kids. I really just want to win. And then we let that person get in and change it all. That's what we can't have happen. And so getting back to what we're originally talking about is accountability to the people at the table. We can't let those people come in and influence us away from our original vision of what we're trying to achieve. So we do need to be steadfast in what we're saying, but be very clear in what you're saying. And if what you're saying is we want to win at all costs, this is not the right thing to say.
And I think the culture is it's such a great point. And I think the culture of an organization, it's not hard to figure out. You just need to walk into a club and stand there. You can watch a practice on one rink, a game on the other rink. You can sit and listen to the dressing room. You can sit upstairs in the pub and listen to the parents. You can pick up the culture in 10 minutes of what an organization is and isn't. So that's part of doing our homework as a parent and deciding what kind of culture do we want to have our kids in and participate in. And again, everyone's got a responsibility. Everyone's got some skin in the game. To Daryl's point, don't pay your money, toe the line, go along with the whole thing, and then complain afterwards. Like, that just doesn't work.
Exactly.
Another thing I just want to throw at you two as a solution is, where are the funders and grantors and sponsors of all these organizations? Because money talks. So I find it hard to believe, and that we've been in the sponsorship game, Elisa, you and I, Daryl, you and I, we've all three of us have been going to get sponsorship. You remember we had to have metrics, and we had to have data, and we had to have how many eyeballs, we had to have how many people were doing that. Like,
don't forget research.
It was unbelievable, of course, evidence-based. And we didn't get money if we didn't show those things. So my question is, and I know this might be naive on my part, how the hell do these organizations continue to receive money without doing that from the parents, which they take from registrations, but also from sponsors, the community, their higher ups, whether it's a PSO, an NGB, or NSO? How do they keep getting money? How do they keep getting allowed to survive in this forum?
I have a just real quick story on that, on what you're saying, like, how do we let this happen? Daryl was saying, like, this is AAA, this is, the top hockey club, and, not to pick on hockey, and I love hockey, whatever club you want, this is the top. How could you not want to be here? This is who we are. Come on in. And this is what you've been working for. This is the vision you've been given since you were a little kid. And now you finally made it. And you get into it and you realize, to your point, Matt, you get in there for 5 minutes and you're like, this isn't the culture I thought it was going to be. Like, this isn't what I expected, but I've worked my whole life to get here. I just watched the little short called Expat about Patrick Berland and his story about basically leaving the NHL and deciding this isn't what I want. And he has his own reasons for trying to leave. And then he went back and he plays in Sweden now, and he's real happy. But he had to take a step back. And I was asking, when we were watching it, I was asking, like, his whole life, he dreamed of coming to the NHL. Like, that was his goal, was coming out here. And he played and he had great seasons. And what happened? What major thing happened that now he wants to leave? And I think it was a lot related to the culture and to the club and to what happened and some of the bureaucracy around it, and said, there's more to life than money. And there's more than wanting to be part of the esteem of this club. And he's gone back to a place now where he's truly happier. And you got to think, like, you got to take a step back and realize, are we doing this because we're chasing the prestige of it all? Of course, I want to be on the top team, and I want to be in the top league, and I want to be able to go to the top university for my sport, but at what cost? And I think we need to look at our sport clubs and realize, what cost are we putting out there by doing the things without having these in place? What cost are we putting our kids through? And Matt, you've mentioned this, and Daryl, I know you've mentioned this, is the dropout rate. These kids are dropping out of these sports, and remember, this is the cost we're getting, and it's only getting worse. So that's the true cost of what we're doing today. So how do we address that and make it something better? Because we know that winning at all costs isn't going to hold them there.
Man, you said a lot of good stuff. You know, we have to, these organizations have to work more like a functioning team, you know, and you know, one of the questions is how do we turn an organization into an accountable team? Because that's the only way this is all going to come together. Not to get into Netflix, but I just watched this Last Dance with Michael Jordan, and I'm watching how this organization decided they want to win a championship and how they had to change. And it was the top down. Matt, you always talk about that. But I think that's where these organizations got to decide what they want their identity to be. And if that's their identity, we want to be a place where, you know, best environment, play as long as possible for us in the best environment. That's it's got to come from the top down. And if that doesn't happen, you and I, Matt, we can talk till we're blue in the face, Elisa. It ain't going to change. It starts from there.
Yeah, and if it's not going to change, you made a good point, Daryl. Just like your teacher example, then you have a choice to make.
Yeah.
Because if the environment doesn't change, you get the choice. And Lisa, that's exactly what you're saying. Through your example, was the Daryl decided to pick up and leave, and that's too bad because that's a loss for the end consumer, which is the kid. Which are these kids that wanted a coach, that wanted someone that was invested in them, that wanted someone that went above and beyond pretty much everything we tell the kids they need to do to be successful, but we're unwilling to actually model on a consistent basis. And that is unfortunately an option. So if you go into a club or an organization and you go through this process, because look at, once again, what we're trying to help people come up with answers. So far we've said, number one, be vocal. So be vocal. You go and you look at the mission, vision, goals, and objectives. Do your homework, actually. Sorry, before that, do your homework, like Elisa says. Before you even get into the organization, go on their website, research what they're doing, talk to people that have been there before, because they're going to give you, talk to a wide variety of people, talk to people that had good experiences, whose kids were good players, talk to people that didn't have good experiences, whose kids weren't, quote unquote, deemed good players. First of all, do your homework. And that's just what we talked about last time. Market research, environmental scan. Do that. That's your responsibility, because if you haven't done that, it's like not voting and then complaining about the person that got elected. So first of all, do your homework. Second of all, if you see something, you say something. And what's the saying? There's nothing more painful than the silence from those who are close to you than the loudness from all the critics. So if you see something that's wrong, you have to say something. So that's number 2 point, tangible takeaway. And say it to the right people.
These are great first steps, Matt.
The parents in the bar who are also drunk and three bottles of wine in, that's not the right people. They can't do anything for you. You've got to go through their processes, technical director, coach, director, ombudsperson, whatever it is. And on that, see something, say something. Don't just do it for your own kid. Do it for all the kids. Do it for all the team. Be a good human being. That's easy to do. We're talking about controlling our controllables. We can control that. Okay, so you get all that done and you still don't have anything. Well, then you got to ratchet it up. So then you got to start asking for stuff. Can I see the audited financial statements for the last 4 years? I want to know about registration. You can either do that at the beginning, because that will tell you a lot about the organization if you do it at the beginning in your market research, or you can do it when you're just about to launch into I've gone through all the steps, nothing's worked, now you got me. Now I'm invested. And now I'm going to do some homework, and now I'm committed to being that guy or that gal for the right reasons that needs to help you move on. Once you're committed, you're committed. Know what you're getting. Know that you're going to get the big X. Know that people are going to avoid you. Know that you're going to be the big shit disturber. Just know that, but understand you're doing it for a greater good, which every single person we talk to this week is. Okay, now, number 4, offer something. Hey, listen, here's some books. They're not written by me. This can teach you how to manage, because that's what's needed, that leadership, the management. Here's what great leadership looks like. Do we have budget to do this on our team, in our organization? So don't just ask questions and make statements without solutions. Bring your solutions to the table, and make sure in the elections you are there. Because again, this all happens in the AGM, and it happens really quickly. You get one email. Oh, by the way, the AGM's tomorrow night. Okay, you couldn't vote. My best buddy is now the new president. Like, you got to be on it, and you got to show up, and you got to ask the questions. So what's your platform? What's your vision? What's your mission? What's the number one issue that we got from last year that we need to change? What are we doing well? What aren't we doing well? So those are some points that can help. They're better than nothing. I mean, we're not just gonna bitch, but we've got some points.
Steps. Awesome first steps. You got anything to add to that for those first steps? Elisa,
Yeah,
anything?
definitely. I think one thing too that we haven't really touched on too much about this is how we communicate what we're trying to say. So we always, look at somebody and think like, how can I get this message across to that person? Matt, you had some really good points about like the critical thinking piece, being prepared with what you're coming to the table with, and trying to go forward with that intention behind what you're trying to achieve, better leadership or support the management or look at our vision or focus. And I think what's really important is how we communicate that. There's a really good story in the book by Malcolm Gladwell called Tipping Point, where there's a kid and he was working in a company that produced gloves. And he said, we're buying all these gloves from all over the place. They're all different prices. Like, look at this spreadsheet. Don't you see here? This doesn't make any sense. And he's showing it to leadership. And leadership just kind of keeps knocking him down. Finally, he says, you know what? I'm calling a meeting. Calls a meeting with, I can't remember, Matt, you probably remember. I can't remember what he used as the hook. Gets them there, dumps all the gloves on the table with the prices on them and says, look at what we're doing. And they then were able to see this glove and the glove are exactly the same. Why is this one $4 and this one $15? Why are we doing this? This is craziness. We need to change. So that example, there's so many like that, how you say and how you convey your message to someone. And you have to understand that person as well to know who you're talking to. And this is sales marketing 101. Know your audience is really going to affect how that message is received. So when you're the parent, like you said, and you're parent in the stands and you're drinking your wine, and you come down, you're berating the coach right after a game, it's not the way to get your message heard. It's not going to happen. So be very clear and critical with your message and understand your audience and how can you motivate them to truly hear what you're trying to say. And you might have to get a little creative with it because just straight words might not just be doing it. You have to go around a different way to get that same message across.
Nice.
Yeah, people don't like feedback. So listen, and you're talking to a guy that gives feedback and people go, he's an asshole. But people just don't like feedback. So just know that they don't like feedback. And Elisa, after you've exhausted your strategy, which I do agree with, you also have to understand that people are going to get defensive. Well, I'm just a volunteer. Well, I'm not being paid very much for this. Well, I know. Well, I'm an athlete. Well, I'm this. Well, I have experience. Well, who are you? Blah, blah, blah. So just understand that that's part of the game, and don't get beaten down. You have options. You have options to go to different places. You have options to go to different catchments in most cases. Unfortunately, unfortunately this opens the window for this whole pay to play thing, but it's actually no better there either. As a matter of fact, arguably it could be worse.
Yeah.
So don't think that just by leaving over here to go over there that it's going to be better, because it's not always the case, and you're out 25 grand on top of that. So it's not an easy subject. Again, it's not one that I have the answers to, or else the sports system would be a lot better. But it's a question that needs to be asked. It's a discussion that's worth having, given the fact that my thing is, and I'm unapologetic about it, is if the attract, retain, and growth metrics decrease on your watch year after year after year, if it was any other sector or private business, you would be out of a job.
Daryl, we heard both Matt and I gave it. What have you got for the first steps? You got anything else to add to this? There's been a lot said.
Well, you guys pretty much covered everything. Does accountability matter in sports? Yes. According to everything you guys said, it's huge. It sets the standard for excellence. If that's where you're headed, it sets the standard for excellence. So if you're not about that and putting your kid in a great environment, then accountability doesn't matter. You're gonna, it's like shady people. You don't know what you're gonna get. You're gonna get random. So accountability does matter for youth sports, and you guys had some solid points. This was a great discussion today. Like, honestly, I talked less, I got more. Guys, on that note, just go play. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you like this, share this with your friends. Tell everyone. Thank you guys for listening.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.